This is that 66 Bassman, the first one that came in. Here in the old doghouse cover, you can see a bunch of parts that I've pulled from the amp, original ones that I'll bag up and return with the amp. Here you can see two new phenolic tube sockets with the bear trap retainers put back, and a new pair of tongue saw 6L6 GC STR tubes, because the ARS that came in were dramatically mismatched, and one was idling about 56%, the other one at 40. That's too much. Not only is it hard on one of the tubes, but there was an output hum because it didn't have common mode cancellation. In the original video for this, I said all the iron was original, and I'm revising that, having worked on this, and something I'll show you on the other side. It was hard to make out on the power transformer, but it has a date code of 4, which would be 64 or 74. In this case, given the age of the cloth insulated wiring on it, I'm going to go with 64. So I think at some point, possibly related to whatever caused the output sockets to be changed, this got a replaced power transformer, and it's not the standard model for this amp. It's one of the Schumachers from that era. I'll show you the difference, but the voltages are fine, so it's a fine choice. So we do have original choke and original output transformer. The power transformer, I believe, is 64. More on that in a moment. All right, it's all been recapped. Got 2-watt metal film 220K balance resistors in there. Got 2-watt metal oxide dropping resistors, 27K, 4.7K, 1K. The new FNT caps. And for more on how I do this, see the Vibrolux Reverb video from a couple weeks back where I show the entire process. But to recap, no pun intended, or pun unavoidable, the leads are not just tucked into these solder joints. They actually go under the eyelet and are bent over and then snipped about here. So there's a mechanical connection. There's no stress on the leads, and there's a bit of silicone holding each one in place because the doghouse foam doesn't touch these, and this is a better way to do it. So these caps aren't going anywhere. In 15, 20 years, when this needs to be recapped again, a tech can just go through there with a little razor blade. That old silicone will scrape right off, no big deal. So let me go to what's on the inside of the amp. The holes that someone had drilled in there, the chassis there for a bad effects loop, have been replaced with these nice nickel plugs, so that's all good. Let's get this on the inside now. Okay, here's that power transformer, and given the age of the wires and that it's all cloth covered, I'm thinking 64. It's possibly 74, but 74 I would have expected to have plastic insulated wires. What's unusual about this transformer compared to the original is that it does not have a center tap for the heater balance resistor. I'm going to take this off autofocus because that's useless. Okay, does not have a center tap for the heater's secondary, which means that this transformer is designed to be used in an amp which had the heater balance resistors like you see here, and you get in a lot of Fenders, but this amp did not have them. Now, I did not play this amp when it first came in because the filter caps were so dire, but if I had, it would have hummed terribly. So the owner will be glad to know that his amp will no longer hum. I've taught it the words. So here on the bias board, I've taken everything out. New 1N4007 diodes put in place, new jumper wires as necessary, a new 2-watt dropping resistor there, a Vichy 47 microfarad 100 volt cap there, and you can see the chassis connection for that ground, and for the HT center tap, and the reservoir cap, and the AC safety ground, all done to chassis, not to the transformer mounting hardware. While I'm in this area, you can see the changed out output tube sockets. Phenolics, very similar to the originals. New 1.5K grid stoppers, new 470 ohm 3-watt screen grids. The cathode connections are redone straight to chassis. I didn't have any of the braided wire handy like they did originally, but this loop of standard wire with a cloth insulation has no stress on it. That will be very reliable. All right. This amp originally had the bias balance setup of a 165, AB165. And whenever possible, I retain that and I add an additional circuit which lets you control the overall bias level as well as the balance. I'll show that on the second one. But on this one, since it had this hole drilled in the panel, I put in a post-phase inverter master volume, the one that people call the LARMAR. And I found that that did not interact well with the the bias balance pot. As this was changed, the bias balance would need to be changed. It was exacerbated a bit by the old ARS tubes. So I simplified it and went to the earlier Fender bias, which just gives you overall bias level, and you have to have matched tubes. These tubes are matched. So in conjunction with this works really well. These 2.2 megs are there so that if something went wrong with this pot, the grids of the output tubes would still have a bias reference, be cold, but nothing would fail. It's unlikely, but it's possible. Let's see here. The original 400 volt 20 nanofarad coupling caps on the output were bad. They often are on Bassman, which have 400 volt caps there. They really need 630 volts to handle the voltage, especially at the moment you first power the amp on. Take it out of standby. This is a surge, and that surge over the years nukes those 400 volt caps. I've changed it from the AB165 to the AA864 phase inverter circuit, which is much quieter. Took out the local negative feedback, those 220Ks that used to be here. Let's see. New cathode bypass caps throughout. A lot of new plate resistors. The old ones, as they get old, they absorb moisture and they drift and they get noisy. The stock amp has a 1 nanofarad cap across this plate and a 500 picofarad across this plate. Makes the amp overall dark. I take the 500 picofarad out and I move it to here, and I take the 1 nanofarad out. Leo Fender's concept of bass was very much a doom, 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 doom kind of sound, and the amp will still do that, but you also can have some nice high-end articulation without it getting hissy. Reflow the solder joints on all the preamp tubes, because over the years, especially when the board warps like this, they get a little bit of strain on them. This cap was a ceramic disc. Those almost invariably become microphonic in these amps, so it's got a orange drop 6PS cap like here. These are not the 715Ps or the 716Ps. Those are polyurethane. What's the word I'm looking for? Polypropylene caps, and these are polyester. The polyester is much more like what Fender used at the time. It's a very subtle difference, if any. In some circuits, at some points in some circuits, you can hear a difference. In general, you won't hear a difference here. This one arguably has a little bit of a role, but when in doubt, go with the material that they originally used, so polyester it is. The deep switch in the stock circuit likes to thump. If you add a 1 meg resistor here from this cap junction to ground, that de-thumps this switch. As you can see, both switches were replaced. New shielded wire put in from the input and wiper of each of the volume pots. So here's the input, here's the wiper. Let's see here, anything else to show? I I think that's about it in terms of showing what we did. As part of this, you've got to reverse the green and black on the output tube. So if you try this and don't do that, you'll get horrible squealing feedback. Just generally shortened and cleaned up some of the wiring here and there. All the pots were cleaned. So I'm going to let you hear it a little bit in this video, and then I'll do a final playing video. All right, here's the bass channel. And the deep switch. I know a lot of guys like to promise that they can turn this channel into a Marshall. And you can do it, but you've got to change out pretty much all the pots to get it there, or at least the ones in the tone stack, if you want to have it actually perform right. And I think the stock channel, both for bass and guitar, sounds cool enough. The world's got a lot of Marshalls. It doesn't have a lot of AB165s that are playing correctly, that are working as designed. And so I like the stock sound. And remember, this is the bass channel. I'll turn the master down. Phone compression is not going to let you really hear what that master is doing. But the one thing the phone video does do with the compression is it shows that the tone does not change drastically as the master volume is turned down. So you can use this at Princeton levels. Be the joy of neighbors and significant others everywhere. I'll turn the master back up, and we will go to the normal channel. And the reason I change out this pot, this volume pot, is it was not going all the way to ground, and it was humming, and that hum would come and go. It's not there at all now, and the hum would be worse in the middle of its travel. The hum's gone now. That's just the standard white noise. This amp has a lot of gain. I'll really show that in the playing video, but here's the normal channel. Bright switch off. Bright switch on. I'm not a fan of the bright switch, but now it doesn't pop, and the deep switch doesn't pop either, which is nice. There's a little bit of it, not nearly as much as there was in stock form. If you saw the previous video on the other 66, you saw that the wires underneath the board were pulled out and replaced with new wires going over the board. I don't think it's necessary on this amp, so I'm leaving it as is. It's possible that down the line that will be necessary, but it's also possible that this will stay fine for another 20 years. This amp is in very clean condition now. Had to get a lot of DC off the board, a lot of really boring stuff to do to get it there, but it's there, and I'm really pleased with it. And I had a bad V2, which is the third gain stage, which made it a little bit noisy. But the amp is sounding great now, and with the master volume turned a little bit down, the noise floor disappears, and even at 10 it's pretty much quiet, and if I had the shielding here, it'd be about perfect. So We like perfect.